Hello, I'm Jim Franks, and this is Verse by Verse, a short podcast that will explore insights and lessons from the Bible. What if someone asked you the question, what is the greatest commandment? How would you answer? We really don't have to scramble for an answer since this question was asked of Jesus himself. How do you think he answered? Let's look at the scripture where this is found. Matthew chapter 22, verses 35 through 38. But let's begin with verse 34, which tells us who is asking the question and possibly why. Matthew 22, verse 34. But when the Pharisees heard that he had silenced the Sadducees, they gathered together. Now, the key to understanding this section of Scripture is identifying the Pharisees and Sadducees and where they differed in their teaching. First, we should answer the question, well, who are these individuals? Now, for the sake of this podcast, I'll give you the short and simple answer. But I would encourage you to do your own study as to who these two groups were and what they stood for. Now, the simple and short answer is that the Pharisees and Sadducees were two parties among the Jewish religious establishment of the first century. Now, neither group existed when the Old Testament concluded. It was during the intertestamental period that the synagogue system, along with the Sanhedrin and the various religious parties, developed. The Pharisees were by far the largest group, and they basically controlled the synagogues. The Sadducees were much smaller and were considered the priestly group, since many of the priests belonged to this group, which gave them control of the temple worship. One of the premier beliefs of the Sadducees was that there would be no resurrection. This is found in Matthew 22, verse 23. Let's read this verse. The same day the Sadducees, who say there is no resurrection, came to him and asked him. So they asked him a what-if question about the resurrection, which they did not believe in, to try and trick him. Christ shut them down with his answer. So now along come the Pharisees, who were the dominant party among the Jewish religion, and their beliefs included a strict observance of the law of Moses. So how would Christ respond to them after he had silenced the Sadducees with his previous answer? Keep in mind that their purpose is to trick Christ, since he was becoming too popular and attracting large crowds. Let's continue with our reading. Matthew 22, verses 35 through 38. Then one of them, a lawyer, asked him a question, testing him and saying, Teacher, which is the great commandment in the law? Jesus said to him, You shall love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, and with all your mind. This is the first and great commandment. Now, what exactly was Christ claiming? It seems a bit nebulous to simply say, Love the Lord your God. Keep in mind that he was speaking to the Pharisees, who are strong supporters of the law of Moses, including the Ten Commandments. Was Christ denying the Ten Commandments, or was he reinforcing the commandments? It seems obvious, based on the Pharisees' support for the law, that if Christ was actually doing away with the commandments, there would have been an uproar, and the Pharisees would have gotten what they wanted, to have Christ on record changing or denouncing the law. Clearly, they did not interpret this to be what Christ was saying, so what was he saying? To love, worship, and honor God is the highest of all commandments. In fact, the first 4 of the 10 commandments tells us how to love God. Let's bring in a couple of additional scriptures. There are a number of scriptures in the writings of John the Apostle that expand on Christ's statement. For example, we are told in 1 John 2, verse 4, He who says, I know him, that is God, and does not keep his commandments is a liar, and the truth is not in him. Then John adds in the next verse, But whoever keeps his word, truly the love of God is perfected in him. By this we know that we are in him. It seems that Christ wasn't doing away with anything, but giving a summary of what was already found in the Ten Commandments. The first 4 deal with loving, respecting, and worshiping God as the highest of human priorities. These are found in Exodus 20 and Deuteronomy 5. The first 4 are, in summary, You shall have no other gods before me. Worship me fully. You shall not make any carved images of God or any creature to worship. You shall not take the name of the Lord your God in vain, and you shall remember the Sabbath day to keep it holy, which is a day to worship God. These 4 commandments further explain what Christ was talking about. And of course, the Pharisees could not criticize Christ for something that they also agreed on, to love God first and foremost, which was a concept the Pharisees also embraced in their own way. Of course, Christ went even further by supplying what he called the second great commandment. We'll explore this on our next podcast.
Verse by Verse is a companion podcast to the Daily Bible Verse blog, which you can find on the Life, Hope, and Truth Learning Center. Check out the show notes for more.